The coupling had been degrading for 3 weeks. Nadia Akafer knew it the way she knew everything about the Prometheus, which was from the inside, from the specific position of being on her back on a maintenance crawler beneath the ship's port weapons array housing with a diagnostic tool in one hand, and the replacement coupling in the other, and the particular smell of the depot around her. Recycled air and old metal, and the specific chemical signature of the sealant, compound that the port section's environmental system had been slowly leaking for 2 months, which was another item on the maintenance list that had not been addressed, because the parts had not arrived, and the parts had not arrived because nobody in the UEDF supply chain prioritized parts for a ship that was not officially in service. 3 weeks for the coupling, 2 months for the sealant, 4 years for everything else. She had been on the Prometheus for 4 years. She had been under it, inside it, through it, across it, in the maintenance crawlers and the engineering tunnels, and the spaces between the hull layers that the original engineers had built for exactly this kind of access, and that she had been the only person using regularly for most of her command. 41 crew on a ship designed for 400. 41 people maintaining a vessel that UEDF Command had officially classified as salvage assignment, pending disposal, no combat deployment intended, which was the institutional language for forgotten. She had not forgotten it. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thorne was above her, sitting on the edge of the crawler platform, handing down tools when she asked for them, and making the specific kind of observations that 11 years on the Prometheus had given him the credibility to make. Should have replaced that coupling 2 months ago. I know. Parts took 2 months. I know, Marcus. If we'd ordered the parts when I first flagged it, the parts would have taken 2 months regardless of when we ordered them, because the supply chain does not prioritize parts for decommissioned prototypes on salvage assignment. A pause. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. She had the old coupling out and the replacement coupling in her hand, and was working it into the housing with the specific patience of someone who had done this kind of work enough times to do it correctly the first time rather than quickly, when Thorne's comm buzzed. She heard it, she heard him look at it. She heard the 4 seconds of silence that followed. She knew before he spoke. Commander. His voice told her everything before the words did. 11 years on the same ship with the same person produced that kind of communication, the kind where the tone carried more than the content, and the content was almost secondary. She said, "What?" Vega Station, Imperial Fleet, 12 contacts, Admiral Veshmora's formation. A pause. They jumped in 40 minutes ago. Nadia stopped working. She lay still beneath the ship for 2 seconds with the replacement coupling in her hand, and the diagnostic tool on the crawler, and the smell of the depot around her, and the specific weight of a situation arriving that she had been, without fully articulating it to herself, aware was eventually going to arrive. She said, "Casualties. Station is intact. Compliance window issued, 6 hours." Thorne paused. 12,000 people, Commander. Nadia looked up at the underside of the port weapons array housing. At the Prometheus above her, 4 years of maintenance and learning, and quiet work on a ship that nobody else had cared about. She slid out from under the ship. She stood up, she looked at Thorne, he looked at her. She said, "How far?" 3 hours at maximum FTL. She looked at the Prometheus, the ship that UEDF Command had filed as a failed prototype, the ship that had been sitting in this depot for 4 years, while the documentation that described what it actually was sat archived in a classified server that nobody accessed because the program had been canceled, and the program being canceled meant nobody had reason to access it. She had accessed it. She had spent 4 years accessing it. She said, "Start the engines, all of them." Thorne said, "Commander, we're a salvage assignment. We have 41 crew. We haven't fired weapons in." Marcus. "Yeah. Start the engines." A pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to last for him to make the decision he had already made before she said his name, the decision that 11 years of service made automatic. "I, Commander." The FTL transit took 2 hours and 58 minutes. Nadia used them. She gathered her 41 crew in the Prometheus's main corridor, which was not the briefing room because the briefing room's environmental system had been offline for 2 months, and she had not prioritized fixing it because the briefing room was not a system she needed to be operational for a salvage assignment. She had prioritized other things. 41 people in a corridor designed for more than 41 people, which meant there was room, which meant they could see each other's faces, which meant they could see hers, which was what she needed. She said, "I'm going to tell you what you've actually been maintaining for 4 years." She pulled up the Prometheus schematic on the corridor display, the schematic that was in the classified archive, the one she had spent 8 months finding and 18 more months verifying against the physical reality of the ship around her. She said, 17 years ago, a team of engineers led by a woman named Rosa Delgado built this ship as a testbed for experimental systems that were considered too advanced for standard deployment. 7 systems, none of them used in live combat, 3 of them classified as too dangerous for standard deployment, all of them forgotten when the program was canceled due to budget reallocation. She paused. "I found the documentation 4 years ago. I have spent the time since making every system operational." The corridor was quiet. Petty Officer Anna Webb, 24 years old, 2 years on the Prometheus, who had been assigned here fresh from training because her posting orders had been processed by someone in UEDF assignment, who was working through a backlog, and had not looked carefully at the classification on the Prometheus's assignment category, said, "All 7 systems." "All 7. What does System 1 do?" Nadia said, "It's called the Cascade Array. The original engineers called it too unpredictable for standard deployment. What it actually does is fire 6 weapon solutions simultaneously from independent emitters sharing a single targeting computer. No point defense system in any fleet has the reaction speed to intercept 6 simultaneous solutions arriving from 6 independent angles." Thorne said from the back of the group, "We have a cascade array." "Yes. And nobody told us." "The program was canceled. The documentation was archived. I found it 4 years ago and spent 18 months working out the targeting synchronization." "Is it operational?" "All 6 emitters, yes." "All 7 systems?" "All 7 fully operational." The corridor was quiet again for a moment. Then Thorne said, in the specific tone he used when he had already decided the next thing and was performing the question as a formality, "Commander, what else does this ship do?" She told them. She told them about System 2, the reactive hull composite that Rosa Delgado's team had developed as an alternative to standard ablative armor, a layered material designed to redistribute weapons' impact energy across the hull's surface, rather than absorbing it at impact points, theorized to cause weapons specifically designed for concentrated penetration to fail in ways that no weapons officer had training to compensate for. Because no weapons officer had ever encountered a hull that behaved this way. She told them about System 3, the pulse drive, a propulsion modification that converted weapons power to thrust for a 2.1-second burst, enabling the Prometheus to accelerate from 0 to combat speed in 1.8 seconds, 3 times faster than any known vessel by any specification on record. She told them about Systems 4 through 7 in enough detail for them to understand what they were, and not enough detail to make the next 3 hours feel longer than they needed to feel. When she was done, the corridor was quiet for a moment that lasted longer than the previous silences. Then Anna Webb said, with the specific directness of someone 24 years old who had not yet learned to soften the obvious, "Commander, why didn't anyone know about this?" Nadia said, "Because the program was canceled, and the people who canceled it stopped looking at it, and the people who were supposed to look at it afterward looked at the classification and decided it wasn't worth looking at. That's what happens to things that get filed incorrectly. She looked at her crew, 41 people who had been maintaining a ship that everyone had decided wasn't worth caring about, in a depot that nobody visited, on a posting that nobody wanted. You have been taking care of something for 4 years that nobody else thought was worth taking care of. I want you to know that I know that, and I want you to know what you've actually been taking care of. The corridor held that for a moment. Then Thorne said, "Aye, Commander." He said it in the tone he used when something was settled. "What are our combat assignments?" She told them. The comm from Vega Station came through 40 minutes into the transit, not through official channels, through the civilian relay, addressed to the Prometheus directly, which was unusual enough that Anand on communications flagged it before routing it to Nadia's station. The message said, "This is Rosa Delgado. I designed your ship. If you're coming here, I need to talk to you before you engage. There are things about the Prometheus that are not in any file. Call me." Nadia looked at the message for a moment. Then she opened the channel. Rosa Delgado appeared on the screen. 58 years old, silver-haired, with the specific quality of attention in her face that engineers had when they were looking at a problem they were genuinely engaged with, which was different from the attention they had when they were performing engagement, and which Nadia recognized because she had it herself. Behind Rosa, through a station observation port, 12 Imperial warships were visible as distant points of light. Rosa looked at Nadia, then at the visual feed of the Prometheus's command center, then at Nadia again. She said, "You kept her running." Nadia said, "Someone had to." Rosa said, "The cascade array, is it operational?" "All 6 emitters." Rosa was quiet for a moment. "I spent 6 months on the targeting synchronization and never solved it. I had 4 years and nothing else to do." Rosa looked at her. Something moved in her face that was recognition and something more than recognition. She said, "The hull composite, you know the theoretical specifications. I know the documentation. You know it has never been tested under live fire. I know. I have been trying for 17 years to figure out whether my theoretical model was correct. The redistribution model." She paused. "I believe it is correct. I have believed it since the day we finished the hull. I have never had confirmation." Nadia said, "You're going to get confirmation today." Rosa looked at the Imperial ships through the observation port, then back at the screen. "I need to tell you things that are not in the files. Things I did not document because the program was canceled before documentation was complete, and by the time I understood that the documentation mattered, it was too late and nobody was listening." Nadia said, "Tell me." Rosa told her. The System 4 integration with the hull composite, the thing that Rosa had never combined in her theoretical models because she had developed the systems in parallel and had not finished the integration analysis before the program ended. The pulse drive's 1.8-second acceleration was at the edge of what the hull composite could sustain under standard ablative armor specifications. Under the reactive composite's redistribution behavior, the structural stress profile was different. The composite didn't absorb the acceleration stress, it distributed it, which meant the 1.8-second burst was not at the edge of sustainable limits. It was within them, comfortably. Rosa had worked this out in the 17 years since the program ended. She had been waiting for someone to tell. She told Nadia about System 6, the resonance dampener. It was in the documentation, but the documentation did not fully explain what it did in practical terms, only in theoretical ones. What it did practically was absorb the electromagnetic signature of the ship's weapons discharge and redistribute it across the hull's passive emission profile, which meant that, for 0.8 seconds after firing, the Prometheus's weapons signature was indistinguishable from its background hull emissions. to any targeting system trying to predict the next firing solution based on weapons discharge location, the ship became, for 0.8 seconds, invisible. Nadia looked at the cascade array specifications on her display and thought about what it meant to have 6 simultaneous firing solutions that disappeared into the hull signature for 0.8 seconds after discharge. She said, "Rosa, that means their targeting computers can't build a firing pattern." Rosa said, "No, they cannot, because there is no discernible weapons emission to pattern from. Every time the array fires, the targeting record for that shot vanishes into the background. They are fighting a ship that, from a targeting data perspective, is not firing at them. Only the impact exists, not the source." They talked for 40 minutes. Nadia asked questions and Rosa answered them, and twice Rosa asked questions about things she had built that she did not fully know the answers to, and Nadia told her what 4 years of working with the physical reality of those things had taught her. And twice Rosa's expression shifted into the specific look of someone learning something about their own work that they had not known. At the end of 40 minutes, Rosa said, "Nadia, this ship was not a failed prototype." Nadia said, "I know. It was never a failed prototype. We ran out of money. That is not the same thing." "I know that too. You have to bring her back." Rosa looked at the Imperial ships through the observation port. "Whatever happens today, bring her back." Nadia said, "I will." Rosa said, "Good." She paused. "And Nadia, thank you for taking care of her." Nadia looked at the Prometheus around her, the ship she had spent 4 years learning, the coupling she had been replacing when the alert came, which was still not finished because she had not had time to finish it, which was another item on the list. She said she deserved it. The Prometheus dropped out of FTL at Vega Station's outer boundary at 16:23 hours, 2 hours and 58 minutes after leaving the depot. Veshmora's tactical officer said from the sensor station, "Contact. Single vessel FTL emergence at the station's outer boundary. Running identification." A pause. Classification UEDF prototype decommission designation, Prometheus class Hull 1. Admiral, this vessel is listed in our intelligence database as a salvage assignment, non-combat, skeleton crew. Another pause. Our file on this vessel is 17 years old, Admiral. It was flagged as not relevant. Veshmora looked at the contact on his display. 1 ship, against 12, he said, "Noted. Continue compliance countdown." He had been conducting operations of this type for 6 years. 6 stations absorbed. The pattern was consistent, and the consistency was the point, because consistent patterns produced predictable outcomes, and predictable outcomes were the foundation of efficient administration. 12,000 people on a station with nowhere to go and no military response of consequence within range were 12,000 people who would comply when the compliance window closed. He had never needed to demonstrate this more than once per station. He looked at the single contact on his display, a decommissioned prototype with a skeleton crew that had come here from a salvage depot. He considered what it meant that someone had sent it, and arrived at the conclusion that it did not mean very much, that it was probably the only UEDF vessel within range, and someone had sent it because sending something was better than sending nothing, and because humans, in his experience, needed to feel they had done what they could. He went back to the compliance timeline. The Prometheus transmitted on the civilian frequency first. Nadia opened the channel to Vega Station, to Rosa's personal comm, and said, "Rosa, we're here." Rosa said, from the observation deck where she had been standing for 3 hours watching 12 Imperial warships, "I see you." Then Nadia opened the Imperial Fleet channel. She said, "Admiral Veshmora, this is Commander Nadia Akafer, UES Prometheus. You have 12 ships, I have 1. I want you to remember this conversation later when you're trying to understand what happened. You had 12 ships, I had 1, and I want you to think very carefully before you make any decision in the next 30 seconds about why I came here anyway." Silence on the Imperial channel. Then Veshmora's voice, the voice of someone performing patience for someone who was going to need it explained to them. Commander, you have a decommissioned prototype and a skeleton crew. I have 12 Imperial warships. I would ask you to consider the mathematics. Nadia said, I've considered them. Have you? She cut the channel. She looked at Thorn, who was at the engineering station, because the engineering station was where he was most useful, and he had known that before she said it. She said, Cascade Array, target the 3 lead vessels, all 6 emitters, independent angular solutions, fire on my order. Thorn said, solutions locked. Nadia looked at the tactical display, at 12 Imperial ships in the precise formation of a fleet that had done this 6 times and knew how it went. At Vega Station behind them, at Anna Webb at her station, hands steady, 2 years on the Prometheus. At 41 crew doing what 41 crew who had maintained a forgotten ship for 4 years did when it mattered. She said, fire. The Cascade Array fired. 6 simultaneous weapon solutions left the Prometheus from 6 independent emitter positions distributed across the hull, all sharing the targeting computer's firing solution, all arriving at their designated targets within 0.3 seconds of each other, each from a different angular position, each requiring independent tracking from the Imperial fleet's point defense systems. The Imperial point defense was the best in the Imperial fleet. It tracked 3. It could not track 6. The 2 lead vessels took full impact from the 3 solutions that reached them undefended. They did not survive the impact. The 3rd lead vessel took 1 partial hit and went dark on secondary systems. The resonance dampener absorbed the weapon's discharge signatures for 0.8 seconds. On the Imperial targeting computers, the firing solutions existed as impacts without origins. The targeting data showed damaged ships and no discernible source. Veshmora's tactical officer said, Admiral, weapons profile does not match any known UEDF system. 6 simultaneous solutions, 6 independent vectors. Our point defense intercepted 3. The remaining 3, a pause. Admiral, the weapon's discharge signature disappeared after firing. Our targeting computers have no source data for the shots that hit. Veshmora said, very carefully, what do you mean no source data? The discharge signature was absorbed into the ship's background emission profile immediately after firing, Admiral. Our targeting systems have impact data. We have no firing point data. We cannot build a pattern. Veshmora looked at his display. 2 ships gone, 1 damaged, 1 vessel that had fired 6 simultaneous solutions from 6 directions and whose weapon's discharge had then become invisible to his targeting computers. He said, return fire, all ships, concentrate on the Prometheus. 12 ships fired. The Prometheus took the hits. The hull composite did what Rosa Delgado's theoretical models said it would do, which was the thing nobody had known for 17 years, because the program had been canceled before live testing, and the only person who had believed in the model was Rosa, who had believed in it for 17 years in retirement, and was now standing at a station observation port watching it be proven correct. The concentrated fire of 12 Imperial ships hit the Prometheus's hull, and the reactive composite redistributed the impact energy across the surface rather than absorbing it at concentration points. The ship shook. Systems fluctuated. The force transfer was physical and significant, and Anna Webb, at her station, was thrown sideways against the bulkhead by a redistribution surge that the inertial dampeners did not fully compensate for because the dampeners were calibrated for standard ablative armor behavior, and this was not standard ablative armor behavior. She hit the bulkhead with her right arm extended to brace herself. The arm broke at the forearm. She also took a cut to her forehead from the edge of the console housing, deep enough to bleed significantly and look considerably worse than it was, and she pressed the back of her hand against it to slow the bleeding and stayed at her station. The hull held. Thorne said from engineering, his voice carrying the specific quality of someone reporting a number he had not expected. Hull integrity at 91%. No penetration. Commander, concentrated fire from 12 vessels. 91%. Nadia said the composite. Rosa built it to take exactly that. She looked at the tactical display. 10 ships now, 2 gone, 1 damaged. Cascade array, next 3 targets. New angular solutions, fire. Veshmara watched 2 more of his ships go dark and said, to his tactical officer, with the precision of someone who needed exact information and was going to get it. What is that hull composition? Unknown, Admiral. There is no material science record in our database that matches the impact behavior we are observing. Concentrated fire from 12 vessels produced 9% hull degradation. The redistribution pattern suggests a pause. Admiral, the impact energy is redistributing across the hull surface. It is not being absorbed at impact points. It is being moved. Moved laterally across the hull, as if the hull itself is. The tactical officer stopped. Admiral, I don't have a technical framework for what I'm observing. Veshmara looked at the Prometheus on his display. At 9% hull degradation from concentrated fire that should have destroyed it. At a weapons system that fired from 6 angles simultaneously and whose discharge signature disappeared 0.8 seconds after firing. At one ship that had come from a salvage depot classified as non-combat, non-relevant, not worth detailed assessment. He said very quietly, what did they build? The next 20 minutes were the 20 minutes that Nadia had been preparing for 4 years without knowing she was preparing for them specifically. In the same way that all preparation was preparation for something that had not yet arrived, and that looked, when it arrived, both like what you expected and completely different from what you expected. Because expectation was a model and reality was the thing the model was approximating. She fought 10 ships with a crew of 41. And a vessel that nobody had thought was worth fighting with. The Cascade array fired in sequences that never repeated the same angular combination twice, because the Imperial point defense systems adapted in real time, and the adaptation was fast and effective, and would eventually find a pattern if she gave it a pattern to find. She did not give it a pattern. She had spent 4 years learning the array's full angular range across all 6 emitters, and she used that range now, varying the combinations by a principle that was partly tactical calculation, and partly the intuitive knowledge of someone who had spent 4 years talking to a ship in the way that people talked to things they cared about, the knowledge that did not come from documentation but from presence. The resonance dampener held for every firing sequence. The Imperial targeting computers continued to receive impact data without source data. Veshmara's tactical officer, who was very good at his job, attempted 3 different approaches to reconstructing firing point data from secondary sensor readings, and found that the Prometheus's background emission profile was too dynamic to separate weapons discharge from ambient hull signature in the 0.8-second window before the dampener absorbed it. He reported this to Veshmara. Veshmara said nothing. The pulse drive activated for the first time at the 14-minute mark. 3 Imperial vessels had coordinated a simultaneous firing solution on the Prometheus's predicted position, a tactic designed to overwhelm reactive hull composites by tripling the distributed impact load, all 3 shots arriving at the same coordinates at the same moment. The Prometheus's tactical system flagged the coordinated solution 2.3 seconds before impact. There was not enough time to maneuver on standard propulsion. Nadia said, pulse drive, full burn. Thorne said, activating. 1.8 seconds. 0 to combat speed in 1.8 seconds. The Prometheus moving from the predicted position to a position 40,000 kilometers away by the time the 3 coordinated shots arrived at the coordinates where it had been. The 3 shots hit nothing. Veshmara watched them hit nothing and sat with that for a moment. He said to his tactical officer, "How fast did that ship move?" His tactical officer gave him the numbers. Veshmora looked at the numbers. He said, "That is not possible for a vessel of that displacement." "No, Admiral, it is not, by any propulsion specification we have on file." Veshmora looked at the Prometheus on his display. He had lost 6 ships. He had watched a hull take concentrated fire from 12 vessels and hold at 91%. He had watched weapons fire 6 simultaneous solutions from 6 directions and then become invisible to his targeting systems. He had watched a ship his files classified as non-combat move 40,000 kilometers in 1.8 seconds. He said to himself and to nobody, it was never a failed prototype. The pulse drive activated for the second time at the 18-minute mark. Nadia took the Prometheus through the Imperial formation. Not around it. Through it. The 1.8-second burn put the ship at the formation center in a fraction of the time any targeting solution could compensate for, and the Cascade array fired at point-blank range as the Prometheus threaded between 3 Imperial vessels that could not complete their targeting solutions at a target moving at that speed at that proximity. 2 more ships went dark. The hull seam opened in the port secondary section 3 seconds after the formation pass. The structural stress of the second full pulse drive activation exceeding the hull composite's sustainable limit for repeated high acceleration events. Not a catastrophic breach. The composite's redistribution behavior kept it from propagating, but a breach, 15 centimeters of open seam that the emergency compartmentalization sealed in 6 seconds, and that dropped hull integrity to 78%. Thorne said breach in port secondary, sealed by emergency compartmentalization, hull at 78%. A pause. I need to go out there. Nadia said, Thorne. It's a field seal, Commander. It'll hold for the engagement, but it needs a proper weld or it'll open again under the next acceleration event. Another pause. I'm going out. He went out, in a maintenance suit that had a slow leak in the left arm seal, because the maintenance suit's integrity had been on the replacement list for 3 months, and the parts had taken time to arrive and were sitting in the storage bay waiting for installation, which was another item that had not been addressed because of the prioritization logic that governed what got done when you had 41 people, and a long list of things to do on a ship that nobody thought was coming back into service. He welded the seam shut by hand in a leaking maintenance suit on the outside of the Prometheus's hull, while the engagement was active above him, and the Imperial fleet's remaining vessels were attempting to find firing solutions on a ship whose weapons discharge signature kept disappearing, and that moved faster than their targeting predictions could account for. He did this because it needed doing. That was the complete explanation. It needed doing, and he was the person there to do it. James Osai, 33 years old, took 3 cracked ribs from the pressure equalization when the emergency compartmentalization sealed the port breach. He reported it to medical, accepted field treatment, and returned to his station. Ensign Yuki Martinez, 26, had been adjacent to the communications console when a power surge from the hull breach event caused a feedback in her headset. The kind of feedback that a properly calibrated headset would have limited to uncomfortable, and that her headset, which had been due for recalibration for 6 weeks, did not limit to uncomfortable. She was deaf in her left ear until medical addressed it. She continued her station duties, using the console's visual display to compensate. Nadia logged both of them. She kept fighting. At the 20-minute mark, 4 remaining Imperial vessels. The tactical display showed the engagement clearly, 4 ships against 1, the 4 ships attempting a distributed pressure formation that was sound doctrine, and was not working because the ship they were applying it to did not behave the way their doctrine had been developed to account for. Veshmora opened a channel to the Prometheus. Nadia accepted it. She looked at him on the screen. He looked at her. 50 years of Imperial service in his face, the specific quality of someone who had made accurate assessments for 50 years encountering an inaccurate one, and processing the adjustment with the discipline that 50 years of accurate assessment had built. He said, "Commander HFY." She said, "Admiral, you have destroyed 8 of my vessels." "Yes." "With a ship that is classified in our intelligence database as a decommissioned prototype on salvage assignment." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I want to ask you a question." She said, "Ask." "What else does that ship do?" Nadia looked at him. She thought about the question. She thought about systems 4 through 7, the systems she had not used, the systems that Rosa had told her about on the transit and that she had known about from the documentation, and that she had been holding in reserve because she had not needed them yet. She said, "That's a good question, Admiral. I am asking it seriously." "I know." She looked at the tactical display, at 4 remaining ships, at Vega Station behind them with 12,000 people, at Rosa's signal on the civilian channel, steady, present, watching. "I'll tell you what else this ship does. It has 4 remaining experimental systems that have never been used in live combat. I know what they do theoretically because I spent 4 years reading the original engineering documentation. I know what they do practically because I spent 4 years making them operational." She paused. "I have not used them because I did not need them." Veshmara said, "And if this engagement continues, then you will find out what they do. And I want to be honest with you, I don't know exactly what they do under live combat conditions. Nobody does. This ship has never been in live combat before today." She looked at him. "The 3 systems you have seen were not in any intelligence file you had on this vessel. The 4 systems you have not seen are also not in any file. I want you to think about that." He said, "You came here with 41 crew." "Yes." "Against 12 Imperial warships." "Yes." "Why?" Nadia said, "Because 12,000 people needed someone to come, and I was the closest someone." She said it the way she said things that were true and did not require elaboration. "I did not come here to destroy your fleet, Admiral. I came here to make a specific point." "What point?" "That you don't know what we have. You filed us as an administrative inconvenience. You absorbed 6 stations in 2 years based on intelligence assessments that categorized human military capability as insufficient to challenge Imperial operations. Your file on this ship was 17 years old and listed it as non-combat, non-relevant." She looked at him steadily. "You were wrong about this ship. I want you to consider whether you were wrong about the 6 stations. Whether they had capabilities your assessments did not account for. Whether the pattern you relied on was built on information that was incomplete in the same way your information about the Prometheus was incomplete." Veshmara said nothing for a moment. He looked at her. He looked at the Prometheus on his display, the ship that his database had filed as a decommissioned prototype, and that had destroyed 8 of his vessels with systems that did not exist in any file he had access to. He thought about 6 stations and 6 intelligence assessments and the consistency of the pattern he had operated within. He thought about what it meant that the pattern had been built on assessments that looked like the assessment of the Prometheus. That the Prometheus had been there the whole time, in the database, filed correctly as to its existence and incorrectly as to its nature, and nobody had looked at the difference because nobody had thought there was a difference worth looking at. He said, "The 6 stations." She said, "Yes." "You are suggesting our assessments of those stations were similarly incomplete. I am suggesting you should consider that possibility before you build the next 6 operations on the same assessment methodology that produced the file you had on the Prometheus." The silence lasted 11 seconds. Veshmara looked at the tactical display. 4 ships against 1 vessel with 4 systems he had not seen used. A hull at 78% integrity that had taken concentrated fire from 12 vessels and was still operational. A weapons system that his targeting computers could not build a pattern for. a propulsion capability that moved the ship faster than any targeting solution could compensate for. 4 systems he had not seen. He said, "Stand down your weapons." Nadia said nothing. She waited. "All ships, withdrawal vector." He looked at her screen. "Commander, I want you to know that I am withdrawing to conduct a reassessment, not a retreat." Nadia said, "I understand the distinction. We will return when we have complete intelligence." Nadia said, "When you return, come with better intelligence than you had today, for your sake and ours." She paused. "I'll be here." Veshmara looked at her for one more moment. Then he cut the channel. His 4 remaining ships turned. The formation was precise and maintained. The specific discipline of Imperial military protocol holding through a losing engagement, and Nadia watched them go on the tactical display with the attention she gave everything on the Prometheus, complete and without performance. When the last contact cleared the system's outer boundary, she said, "All stations stand down. Thorn, damage assessment." Thorn's voice came through the comm, now back inside the ship, in dry clothes that he had changed into in the 30 seconds between sealing the hull and returning to the airlock, because the maintenance suit had continued leaking throughout the repair and he was soaked. "Hull at 78%. Field weld on port secondary is holding. Full weld needed within 12 hours or the seam will fatigue. 3 injured crew, none critical. Systems 1 through 3 fully operational. Systems 4 through 7, undamaged and fully operational." Nadia said, "Good." A pause. "Commander." "Yes." "We just fought 12 Imperial warships." "Yes." "With 41 crew." "Yes." "And nobody died." Nadia looked at the clear system on her tactical display. At Vega Station holding its position. At the crew around her, at their stations, standing down from battle readiness in the specific way that people stood down when something enormous had concluded, and the body was still running on the chemistry of it. She said, "Nobody died." Thorn was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in the tone he used when something had moved him considerably and he was going to express it in a way that did not fully reveal that, "I have been on this ship for 11 years and I always thought it was a dead end." Nadia said, "I know. I was wrong about that." "Yes." "So was everyone else." She did not answer that. It was true and it did not need her to confirm it. She opened the civilian channel to Vega Station. Rosa appeared on the screen immediately, which meant she had been watching the channel and waiting, which was exactly what Nadia had expected. Rosa Delgado, 58 years old, the woman who had built the Prometheus 17 years ago and had watched it get canceled, and had spent 17 years knowing what she had built and not being able to prove it, looked at Nadia on the screen with the expression of someone who has been right for 17 years and is looking at the proof of it. Her eyes were wet. She made no effort about this. She said, "Nadia." Nadia said, "Rosa." A pause. Rosa said, "How is she?" Nadia looked around the command center. At the hull schematic showing 78%. At the system's display showing all 7 operational. At 41 crew standing down at their stations. Anna Webb with a field-dressed arm and a bandaged forehead. James Osai with taped ribs. Yuki Martinez with one functional ear and her eyes on the visual display doing the job she had been doing since the feedback hit. She said, "She's good," she held. Rosa said, "I knew she would." She said it simply, the way you said things you had believed for 17 years with no evidence and had just watched confirmed. She put her hand over her mouth for a moment. Then she lowered it. "I want to come aboard." Nadia said, "We'll dock at the station in 20 minutes. Rosa said, "And Nadia, the targeting synchronization on the Cascade array. I have been thinking about it for the past 2 hours while watching you use it." Nadia said, "And I cannot figure out how you solved it." "I'll show you. I designed the system. You designed it alone in 6 months. I had 4 years and nothing else to do, and I could talk to the ship." Rosa looked at her. "You talk to the ship?" "In a manner of speaking. When you spend 4 years with something that nobody else cares about, you develop a relationship with it." She looked at the command center around her. "She told me what she needed." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly to the screen but perhaps not quite to Nadia, "That is exactly what she would do." The Prometheus docked at Vega Station's main berth at 1711 hours. The station's population had been watching the engagement on the external sensor feed for the past 23 minutes, watching 12 Imperial warships engage a single vessel, and watching the single vessel fight and hold, and watch the Imperial fleet withdraw. The docking bay was full when the ramp came down, the specific fullness of 12,000 people who had come to see the thing that had come for them. Nadia came down the ramp first. She was still in the maintenance coveralls she had been wearing when the alert came, the one she had been wearing under the ship when Thorne's comm buzzed, the port array coupling replacement still unfinished in the housing above where she had been lying when it all started. She had not changed. She had decided not to. Rosa was at the front of the crowd. She had moved to the front with the particular determination of someone who had somewhere specific to be, and was getting there, because it was where she needed to be and the number of people between her, and it was a logistical problem rather than an obstacle. She looked at Nadia. She looked at the Prometheus behind her, the ship she had built and lost and watched from a station observation port fight 12 Imperial warships today. She put her hand on the hull, her palm flat against the composite she had designed, the surface she had spent 6 months calculating the thermal and impact redistribution properties of, and had never seen those properties demonstrated until today. She said to the ship, not to Nadia, to the Prometheus itself, "The way you spoke to things you had made and lost and found. There you are." Thorne came down the ramp. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the docking bay full of 12,000 people who were alive. He was wearing dry clothes and his left boot was still damp from the maintenance suits leak, and he was going to need to requisition a new suit from Supply, which was going to take time because Supply did not prioritize maintenance suit replacement for salvage assignment vessels. He said to nobody in particular, "I'm going to need a new maintenance suit." Somebody in the crowd laughed. Then somebody else. Then the docking bay was full of the sound of 12,000 people laughing, the specific sound of 12,000 people who had watched something happen through a sensor feed for 23 minutes and were now standing in a bay with the people who had made it happen and were letting themselves feel what the past 6 hours had been. Nadia stood at the bottom of the ramp and looked at Rosa's hand on the Prometheus's hull and thought about 4 years in a depot learning a ship that everyone else had decided was not worth learning. She thought about 7 systems, about 4 of them still unused. She thought about Veshmora saying, "We will return when we have complete intelligence." She thought, "Good. Come with better information than you had today. Find out what you were wrong about. Come back having done that and we will have a different conversation." She turned to Thorne, who was standing beside her looking at the crowd with the expression of someone processing something significant in the dry and indirect way he processed significant things. She said, "Damage assessment is 3 days minimum. Full diagnostic on all 7 systems before we do anything else." She paused. "And finish the port array coupling. That's what we were doing before all this started." Thorne looked at her. He looked at the crowd. He looked at her again. "Commander, we just fought 12 Imperial warships with 41 crew and your first priority is the port array coupling. It's been degrading for 3 weeks. Thorne stared at her for a moment with the expression of someone who has served under the right person for 11 years and has known it the whole time and has never said it directly and is not going to say it directly now. He said, "Aye, Commander." He went back up the ramp. Rosa watched him go. She kept her hand on the hull. She said, "He sealed the breach by hand during the engagement in a maintenance suit." It needed doing. And now he's going back to finish the port coupling. The coupling needs doing. Rosa looked at the Prometheus. At the impact redistribution marks across the hull surface, the specific pattern that the composite produced when it did what it was designed to do, visible now as faint discoloration across the surface, proof of 17 years of theoretical modeling done correctly. At the weapons emitter housings where the Cascade array sat, all 6 operational, at a ship that had been sitting in a salvage depot for 4 years. She said, "I'm coming with you." Nadia said, "The posting isn't glamorous." "I built it," Rosa looked at her. "I built this ship to be the most capable warship humanity had ever made, and I watched it get filed as a failed prototype, and I retired 8 months ago because I was tired of watching things I built get filed incorrectly." She took her hand off the hull and straightened up. "I am not retired anymore." Nadia looked at her, at the ship behind them, at the clear space above the station where 12 Imperial warships had been. She said, "Welcome aboard." Rosa smiled. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting to be somewhere for 17 years and was finally there. She said, "Show me what you did with the targeting synchronization." They went up the ramp together. Behind them, the docking bay full of 12,000 people watched the ramp rise, and the Prometheus's airlock seal, and felt the particular feeling of watching something go back to work. The Prometheus was not done. Rosa knew it. Nadia knew it. Thorne, somewhere inside finishing a port array coupling that had been degrading for 3 weeks, knew it. 41 crew who had spent 4 years maintaining a forgotten ship and had found out today what they had been maintaining, knew it. Veshmora had said he would return with better intelligence. He would find better intelligence. He would find out what he had been wrong about. And what he would find, when he looked carefully at what had been filed as non-relevant and non-combat and not worth detailed assessment, was more of the same. Other ships, other systems, other things that had been built and forgotten and maintained by people who had decided they were worth caring about when nobody else had. Because that was what happened when you filed things incorrectly. The things did not become what you filed them as. They remained what they were, and what they were was waiting. The Prometheus waited. It had been waiting for 17 years. It was good at it. It had time,